welcome back to the class, everyone. The Great Mothers are officially in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, and while they themselves are doing some really cool things, they're doing something really important in the background as well, and that is that they are giving a home to some of the other Night Sister characters that didn't really have a place on our first Night Sister team. And that's really important because in Galaxy of Heroes, a lot of the times, what defines whether or not a character is good or bad isn't every single line that is in their kit, but rather where do they fit in the grand scheme of things, and what teams can they be a part of, and what impact can they have there. So what I want to do today is take a look at 10 characters that most people really shouldn't ever gear up, not only because they're bad, but more importantly, because they don't have any home, they don't have any team. And before you already rush to the comments, I saw you coming. We understand what operations are. I am very aware that they exist, that you will need characters at higher relics that you probably don't want to have to gear up. If you're in that position where you had to take one of these characters up to relic 8 or 9 for your guild for territory battles, just know this doesn't apply to you. You are transcendent. You are the hero for your guild. And we're talking about every other single use in the entire game other than that one. So going back to the whole concept of this video, and that is what defines a good character, or part of what defines a good character, is the team that they go on. Here we have Fulcrum and Pow as really good examples of characters who really didn't see any change in their actual abilities, but later found a home because another character came in and specifically interacted what they were wanting to do. Fulcrum going to the Seer team, as well as Pow going over to the Mon Mothma team, and just very recently Acolyte going to the Great Mothers team. Now the 10 characters that don't really seem to do that and haven't thus far are going to be the following, and they're bad. And I guess the whole point of this video is just, don't gear up these characters because there is always a better option, both in accessibility and in overall value. And the first up is going to be Jedi Knight Guardian. And Jedi Knight Guardian had a very, very small time in the sun, based off of the fact that she is both Galactic Republic and a tank. This came into play when she was using the JMK, and because, she's very slow because nobody had her geared up, you could put damage immunity on her and it would take you forever to kill her. This has gone pretty much completely away because ever since Commander Ahsoka Tano came out, you want to be applying that damage immunity / cooldown reduction to that character, so she gets her insta-kill right off the bat. And furthermore, even if you were wanting to play around with that tactic, if you didn't have Cat, holy crap, are there so many better tank options. Even if you can't spare one of the premium ones like Mace Windu or GK, which you probably should be able to, man, take Plo. Plo has an amazing ship, fulfills those requirements, and pretty much can do everything that she can do, but increasingly better, and also really isn't that high of a priority on a lot of other teams. I mean, even Clone Wars Chewie, who has another home with Wookiees at least, would be a better fit, and also his base speed is dirt slow, so you kind of get the whole same thing here. Or maybe don't even take a tank, just take R2 and stealth before they get to go. I don't know. There are so many other good options. Do not ever take Jedi Knight Guardian up if you can help it. Again, platoon heroes or operations heroes aside. Next up is going to be Ima-Gun Di. Overall, just really old antique kit that can't do anything at all in any regards. The only thing that even has slightly going for him is the fact that he's a support and Galactic Republic, meaning, for those of you who are aware, he can be used in a Padme Gideon style team where he will get front loaded with a lot of courage and then eventually decimate the enemy team because he is support and he gets that from Moff Gideon. My issue with this is very similar to our issue with Jedi Knight Guardian, is the fact that when we go into Galactic Republic, we are going to see immediately that there are going to be a ton of better options to the point where you can already fill up the team entirely without ever having to touch Ima-Gun Di. Ayla Secura, typically not a character that is needed in a lot of other teams, is support in Galactic Republic. Shakti, a little bit more valuable. She might be somewhere else, but at the same time, she fulfills that role as well. R2-D2, which does have a place with Leia, but if you don't have her, you're able to use him. Qui-Gon Jinn, especially if you're not using his Omicron, if you're in any game mode that isn't Grand Arena. Basically what I'm getting at is there are a ton of other options. Even Eth Koth, who is a very much on par with Ima-Gun Di and overall viability, he is at least used in the raid and was eventually, or at one point, was in a pack to be able to do so. So there's a slightly larger reason to go after him, especially because they do the same thing, except for he's allowed in the raid and Ima-Gun Di is not. So overall, Yeah, just terrible. Don't ever do it. It's bad. Next up is going to be Jedi Consular. Jedi Consular is probably one of the more controversial ones to have on this list, if we have a controversial one at all. And that's because he has a ship, and I am reminded every once in a while that the ship does damage and things like that. And it's cool that it does damage. The issue is it just doesn't change any single counter in any way, in any possible scenario where you're using him. Jedi Anakin or Marauder or the lack thereof with Ahsoka or Fives, under Negotiator or Mace is going to perform the exact same. We've gone through the win rates of excluding and including Jedi Knight Consular. It doesn't change anything. I guess he could be used transitorily at like Gear 7 where I think you get him for free or something like that. But at the end of the day, he doesn't really need to be geared up. At best, you can take him to Gear 12 so that you can get closer to 4 million GP so that you can get into hard mode Conquest. Other than that, really would not advise. I mean, he's just pretty much wasted GP. All that doesn't even exist anymore as a whole. Next up are going to be a series of Rebel characters that are just, quite frankly, really, really, really bad. And while Luke Skywalker Farm Boy is actually a requirement for CLS, he's still not very good on his own, and you can leave him at least Gear 8, if not significantly lower, to be able to get through that mission. And I've already gotten a few comments before about Bodhi Rook being able to be used on a few teams, and while it is true that he can be used on a few teams, even with the giant influx of Rebel teams that we've gotten over the last couple years, he's still a terrible option. Like, he's awful. You can still make a good Phoenix, a good Sana, a good Mon Mothma, a good Saw Gerrera, a good Fish Guy, a good CLS, and a good Leia team. That's a lot of teams without ever even having to touch him. And it's not even just that you can avoid him, it's that you want to avoid him. Biston in Rogue One is doing, or in the Admiral Raddus team, is doing more than Bodhi would do. Biggs in the Saw Gerrera team is doing more than Bodhi would do. Pow is definitely doing more than Bodhi would do under Mon Mothma. So while you could put him into a multitude of teams, there is always a better option, and most of the time, these characters are not all that hard to pick up. I mean, the big exception being a Luthen right now, but for the vast majority of the other characters, you don't really have that issue. Now, going back to the other two characters, I mean, I don't even think there's really a place for Hoth Rebel Soldier anywhere. Funnily enough, I think when you go into his modding and you try to do their modding suggestions for him, I believe they even call him a tank. Like, they don't even, the game doesn't even know what he is. So why would you use him if the game doesn't even know what he's supposed to be used for? But at any rate, just bad, doesn't really do anything. Not going to go into detail on that. Farm Boy Luke actually has had some interesting strategies throughout the years where he's been able to do cool things. There was a really old raid team back for Heroic Sith Raid, but it did include a lot of investment on him and ultimately wasn't better than a lot of the other tech, even that we had at that very time. So again, get him up to 7 stars to be able to get your Commander Luke Skywalker and then never touch him ever again. I guess some of you might have him at Relic 3 due to the Lightspeed bundle, but that is what it is. Next up, we have Ugnaught, which is such a weird character that doesn't have like a single tag at all. Maybe at some point we get another version of Hondo or Mulch or a combination of the two or a rework or something where Ugnaughts can actually have a place in the game other than Queel being used on a Scoundrel team, although Queel is very good. But my goodness, there's just absolutely nothing going on here in any sense of the word. 75% chance to stun droids for 1 turn. Yikes, it's bad. So yeah, I mean, just why would you? Why would you do that? Next up is going to be IG-86, and IG-86 is a little bit in a sad place because while his kit overall isn't that great, he does kind of hit a little bit hard, which I guess isn't really a compliment at this point. But even when we go and look at the rest of the droids, because where he really would go if he would go anywhere is in the Afra team. And what's sad is when you open up the droids, after you exclude the Separatist droids, you still have more than enough better dark side droids to be put with Afra. And even if you didn't, you could put like Darth Vader on the team, who actually does some pretty fun things, especially with the current support Datacrons giving him a massive amount of extra crit damage. But overall, again, you're going to be putting 000, BT-1, Imperial Probe Droid, IG-88, and maybe HK-47, or even one of the spare Separatist droids that don't get used because there's 6 of them and you only need 5. So overall, just a pretty bad option for any of those droid teams. And even Sortie has a lot of better light side options that you don't necessarily need to dip into. And last, but maybe least, is going to be Teebo and Ewok Scout. The Ewoks currently can only really make 1 team in game, at least in 5v5, and these two just absolutely do not make the cut. The only spot that Teebo even remotely has is his leadership works a lot with stealth. My big problem with trying to argue that you should use Teebo for stealth is that he's like the 6th worst option, or the 6th best option for stealth in the entire game. R2-D2, who's a very accessible character, can pretty much get you all the stealth that you need for whatever feat you're trying to go after. And even if you don't want to do that, the normal Ewoks have enough stealth mechanics in what they are already doing. I mean, Wicket's able to do it, as well as some of the others. So overall, you just don't really need Teebo and what he's doing. The Ewok Scout, obviously nothing's going on here. Ewok Scout even got left out of the Lightspeed bundle pack, which it's not like people should want him, but it was weird that they did it. I don't really get that. But at any rate, that's pretty much where we're left. These are the 10 characters that nobody just really needs at the end of the day, so be sure to avoid them. And hey, maybe be on the lookout. Maybe we'll get another Ewok leader that will be able to fill these 2 out in the very same vein that Night Sister Acolyte and Spirit went to kind of doing pretty much nothing to now doing something pretty incredible. So thank you guys for watching, and as always, stay awesome.